History is often written in the shadow of men, but this story is different. In the endless steppes of ancient Asia, the voice of a warrior woman rose. Her name was Tomyris. Some called her the first female commander, others an Amazon queen. Are you ready for a journey between legend and reality? Tomyris's name echoed not only on battlefields, but also in legends. She appeared in Herodotus's writings and was told for centuries. But she was not just a figure of myth. She was a real ruler. And in those days, a shadow was rising: the Persian Empire. The Masa Jeti people lived a nomadic life. Women fought and rode horses just like men. Tomyris was born among them. She would not only become a warrior, but also a leader. There was nothing ordinary about her. Even after centuries, her story remains full of questions. Who was Tomyris really? A warrior queen? Or a glimmer of truth in male-dominated history? In this video, we will trace her footsteps and bring the legend closer to reality. The Masa Jeti were a nomadic people living east of the Aral Sea. Horses, arrows, and endless steppes defined their world. Women fought, made decisions, and could become leaders just like men. Tomyris was born into such a land, where freedom blended with the soil, the wind, and blood. In the society where Tomyris was born, there was something stronger than blood: loyalty. The tribe came before the individual. Every child belonged to the people. Tomyris learned to hold a bow and ride a horse at a young age, not just to survive, but to one day lead. The Saka society was built on ancient traditions. Sages, warriors, and shamans made decisions together. Tomyris's mother also had a voice in this system. This taught Tomyris early that power came not only from the sword, but also from wisdom. The steppe was more than a place, it was a character. It hardened some, crushed others, and raised a few. It raised Tomyris. Her view of life and loyalty to her people were already visible. A leader was being born, though no one knew it yet. Tomyris's childhood was free of war, but not of unrest. To the west, the Persians were growing. Yet no one saw the storm that was coming. Tomyris, however, grew more ready each day. For the steppe raised its own heroes. The Saka were a branch of the Masa Jeti people. Their way of life was rooted in nomadism, unity, and the art of war. Their lands weren't measured by borders, but by the hooves of horses. As Tomyris grew up in this boundless world, she began to discover her own strength. As Tomyris moved from childhood to youth, she embraced her people's greatest value: loyalty. Family was not just blood, it was shared struggle. Every meal, every night around the fire was a lesson. She was raised not only by her parents, but by the whole tribe. Her father's name may not be found in history books, but he taught Tomyris how to wield a sword and how to show mercy. The balance between war and peace, the leader within her, began to grow through his guidance. Tomyris was a respected young woman among her people. She stood out not only for her courage, but for her sense of justice. Her mind and heart worked together in every decision. These qualities would one day carry her into great responsibility. For someone whose strength came from her people, growing up wasn't just physical. Tomyris was becoming more than a figure. She was becoming hope. Some had begun whispering that she would lead one day, but fate had a painful trial before she could take the throne. Tomyris was married at a young age to a prominent leader of the Saka tribe. In the steppe, marriage was not just a union, it was a political balance. Her husband was a respected figure among the people. Tomyris began to learn governance by his side. She joined war councils and participated in decision-making. But the happiness did not last. Her first major heartbreak came with his untimely death. Her husband's death was not just a personal loss. It created a huge void within the tribe. Tomyris mourned, but did not retreat. Instead of showing weakness, she chose to stand with her people. The pressure to take leadership grew stronger, but that wasn't something easily accepted on the steppe. Because she was a woman, and not everyone was ready for that. Tomyris's leadership emerged from the will of the people. Warriors, wise women, and elders supported her decisions, but some clans silently opposed the new order. Though no conflict broke out, tension was in the air. Tomyris moved forward patiently during this time. If the enemy wasn't within, it would come from outside, and that enemy was slowly approaching. The Persians. The Persian Emperor Cyrus the Great had set his sights on the east. He wanted to bring the steppe tribes under his control. Tomyris's rise to power was seen as an opportunity. Victory against a woman ruler would be easier. So he first sent ambassadors. What seemed like peace offers were actually calls for surrender. Tomyris knew the game had begun at that very moment. Tomyris did not hesitate in the face of this peaceful-looking threat. It was time to apply the leadership lessons she learned while her husband was alive. She rejected the ambassadors. War was inevitable, but she wasn't afraid. She gathered her people, gave speeches, and oaths were sworn. Tomyris was no longer just a wife or a leader. She was now a commander stepping onto the stage of history.
Cyrus the Great had set his eyes on the rich lands of the East. His armies were strong, his resources vast, and his ambition endless. He saw Tomyris's rule as weak, a target too easy to resist. But what stood before him was not an ordinary woman. It was a warrior, backed by her people. He did not hesitate to make the first move. His campaign had already begun. Cyrus first sent envoys. His letters spoke of peace, but the lines whispered threat. Tomyris recognized this language well. She was expected to submit, but she did not stay silent. She gave the Persian envoys a fierce reply, and all heard her words. "I will not bow. Not today, not tomorrow." Tomyris's answer enraged Cyrus. Refusing his peace was like a personal insult to him. War was now inevitable. The Persian armies began preparations. Massive forces gathered at the borders. Cyrus's intentions were clear: to make Tomyris kneel or disappear. The steppe people could feel the rising threat. Tomyris worked not only to protect her tribe, but to unite all nearby Saka clans. She knew this battle was not hers alone, it was for all who lived free. To resist, unity was essential, and that unity was slowly forming. Tomyris chose not to wait for the enemy to strike. She had to land the first blow. Scouts were sent across borders, and maps were drawn. She would use the steppe to her advantage. Against the Persians' organized legions, she needed speed and strategy, and Tomyris knew this better than anyone. This was no longer an ordinary conflict. Tomyris was defending her people's freedom, honor, and future. Cyrus burned with a desire to rule the world. Two leaders, two visions, two destinies were about to clash. The steppe fell silent. Even the wind held its breath. The storm was near. Cyrus didn't want to win on the battlefield. He wanted to win through strategy. He believed he couldn't defeat Tomyris in a direct fight, so he turned to trickery. He set up a massive feast near the border: wine, meat, music. Saka scouts noticed the celebration, but it was a trap, and the first to fall into it was Tomyris's son. Tomyris's son was leading a small unit. He attacked the Persian camp thinking it was vulnerable. At first, they succeeded, but everything changed quickly. The Saka soldiers were made drunk with wine. As night fell, the Persian trap closed. Tomyris' son was captured. Cyrus used the prisoner as leverage. He sent a message to Tomyris. "Your son lives, but if the war continues, he won't for long." This wasn't just a threat, it was torment. Tomyris faced her hardest trial yet. Would she act as a mother or as a leader? It would not be an easy decision. Tomyris considered every possible way to save her son, but the enemy refused any negotiations. Time was running out. Her son's life was tied to the fate of a war. She walked in her tent until morning. At last, she made her choice. She would fight, not for her son, but for her people. The Persians didn't expect this response. Cyrus grew furious. He threw Tomyris' son into a dungeon. Some say he was tortured to death. Others claim he took his own life. But whatever the truth, Tomyris' rage could no longer be contained. The war had become personal. Tomyris didn't mourn. She shed no tears in front of her people. Instead, she began growing her army. Tribes were summoned, weapons were forged. The steppe was preparing for war again. And this time, Tomyris was fighting not just for freedom, but for revenge. Her leadership was no longer questioned. Everyone rallied around her, men, women, young and old. Tomyris' voice echoed across the steppe. "We will never give up this land." Final preparations for war were underway. There was no turning back. Cyrus's game had failed. Instead, it turned Tomyris' resolve into iron. The two armies now stood face to face. Words were over, plans were in place, and Tomyris was stepping forward, not just as a ruler, but as a legend. After losing her son, Tomyris did not stay silent. The army she gathered was now a cry of an entire nation. Revenge may have started as emotion, but it became a voice none could ignore. People joined her from every tribe. Tomyris' name became a battle cry, and with that cry came a vow. Cyrus would fall. Under Tomyris' command, preparations moved quickly. Horses were trained, armor fitted, strategies drawn. But this wasn't simple planning. It was a rebirth. In every warrior's eyes burned the same resolve: freedom or death. The steppe no longer feared. Tomyris' rage had become their courage. Before the battle, Tomyris spoke to her people. She didn't shout. She didn't threaten. With a calm but powerful voice, she said, "This war is not mine. It is ours. My fallen son is your brother too. Cyrus is not just my enemy. He threatens us all." And with those words, they stood united. Tomyris' words were carved not only into the steppe, but into time. They were no longer a leader's speech, but a nation's voice. War was now inevitable. But there was no fear. Tomyris wasn't just seeing the battlefield. She saw a future where freedom would be written with honor. As dawn broke, Tomyris completed her final preparations. War plans were reviewed one last time. Cyrus's army had camped in the distance, but distance no longer mattered. It was time. Tomyris mounted her horse slowly. She looked more like a warrior than a queen. She turned back only once, for the last time. The moment had come. War horns sounded. Horses reared, swords drawn. Tomyris led the charge, her people behind her. The woman who was once just a mother had now become the hope of thousands. And so it began. Before the battle even started, history had already changed. At dawn,
Tomyris's army reached the outskirts of the Persian camp. The warriors were silent, but fire burned in their eyes. Each one stood for both freedom and revenge. The steppe had become a stage for history. The Persians hadn't realized how close the attack was, and then it came. The first arrow tore through the air. The first strike came from Tomyris's forces. The Persian camp fell into chaos. The Saka cavalry were fast, their tactics unpredictable. Cyrus's generals panicked. The free spirit of the steppe broke through their ordered lines. Every clash was a scream for vengeance. Tomyris was writing war not with words, but with her sword. Tomyris was right at the front, not as a commander, but as a vanguard. Warriors followed her, drawing strength from her courage. Every strike echoed a son, a brother, a people rising again. The Persians hadn't expected such fierce resistance. For the first time, victory didn't feel guaranteed. The battle raged for hours. Dust and blood mingled across the steppe. As the sun burned overhead, so did hatred and hope. Tomyris's army was tired but never retreated. Every loss made them stronger, because they weren't just an army, they were a nation, and this war was their rebirth. Toward the end of the day, the balance began to shift. Tomyris's forces had broken into the inner Persian lines. Cyrus's tent was now dangerously close. The war had entered the heart of fate. Tomyris did not stop. She didn't fall back for even a moment, because for her, this was not just a war. It was an end, or a beginning. The final charge began. Cyrus's men started to flee. Tomyris rallied her army one last time and surged forward. The steppe roared with their cry. Men, women, young and old. They fought with one voice. There was now either freedom or nothing at all. On the battlefield, the tide had fully turned in Tomyris's favor. Persian units were scattered, their leaders retreating. Tomyris and her army approached Cyrus's tent. Only a few steps remained to deliver the final blow. Cyrus was surrounded. He could not escape. And in that moment, history was written. Tomyris ended Cyrus's life. Some sources say Tomyris killed Cyrus with her own hands. Others claim he was captured and beheaded. But no matter the version, the result stayed the same. The great Persian emperor was defeated by a woman of the steppe. This was not just a death. It was the closing of an era. Tomyris was no longer just a leader. She was a legend. Tomyris greeted victory in silence. She didn't dance, didn't celebrate. Her son's death had already stolen her joy. But for her people, this was a triumph, because freedom had been won at the highest cost. To her people, Tomyris was no longer a queen. She was a savior. Legend says Tomyris had Cyrus's head cut off. She brought a wineskin filled with blood, and she dropped his skull inside it. This scene is debated by historians. But it remains one of the most powerful tales of revenge in history. Tomyris's victory was not just military, it was symbolic. Her enemies had underestimated her because she was a woman. But in the end, history carved her name in stone. Cyrus's end marked the fall of an age. Tomyris's stance became the quiet but unforgettable voice of freedom. And the steppe carried her name forever.
Tomyris's story is found rarely in history books, but often in legend. Some historians even questioned whether she existed at all. Whether she truly killed Cyrus is still debated, but one fact remains. Her name was told for centuries. And in this world, to leave a mark can be stronger than being real. Tomyris's story is found rarely in history books, but often in legend. Some historians even questioned whether she existed at all. Whether she truly killed Cyrus is still debated,
But one fact remains. Her name was told for centuries. And in this world, to leave a mark can be stronger than being real. Tomyris' story reminds us of one thing. Power lies not only in the sword, but also in belief, determination, and justice. History is shaped by voices like hers. Sometimes it is written, sometimes whispered, but it is always heard. Tomyris was not just a woman. She was history itself. If you enjoyed this story, join us as we keep walking through the dusty pages of history. Like, subscribe, and share your thoughts with us, because every story is reborn with someone who listens. And maybe one day, the story you tell will become someone else's.